And I think one of the hardest lessons I learned, and I definitely learned by doing it badly in my 20s, was, perpetuating this myth that I had to be harsh and shout and drink a lot in the bar and not care about politics or the planet or anybody else's feelings because I'm in motorsport and I'm going to win things.
So welcome again.
You're so international.
International, exactly. Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Leadership. Today I have the pleasure of talking leadership with Ella Barrington. Ella, you are an award-winning business project and operations director, running your own business after a career in the world of motorsport. And it all started with a passion for racing engine design. How did all that happen?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Yes, racing engines, it's quite niche, isn't it? So I grew up in a motorsport family. So my dad was a very enthusiastic amateur racer. He was really successful at what he did, and I grew up kind of being picked up from primary school and taken off to a race circuit, and I thought that was kind of normal and how everybody lived their life. So I grew up around it. In the UK, you can start racing when you're 8 years old, and most kids start even younger these days, which I still can't quite get my head around. But I thought I'd be like my dad and race, but my hand-eye coordination is absolutely shocking. But luckily I was quite good at maths and I was really curious about how things worked and science. So kind of engineering was introduced to me as a much safer career choice. And so I followed that route. I did mechanical engineering for my undergraduate degree. And then when it came to choosing my master's degree, I knew I wanted to go into motorsport. And by that time, I was kind of doing projects and internships with a really fantastic company in that area. And they suggested one MSc. I went there and it wasn't for me, and I was really heartbroken. And then somebody suggested that Oxford Brookes had some masters in motorsport. So I went down there and fell in love with the place. And one of the courses that they did was racing engine design. And there's kind of, they take, at the time, it was about 8 to 10 students a year. And I loved it because racing drivers are quite the characters. They do a lot of things that I couldn't do. But one of the things they're very good at is arguing back and telling you exactly that they are the bravest, most fast superhero out there. And that takes quite some managing. But racing engines, they don't answer back. So actually they were a wonderful way of being in the sport, but without dealing with quite so much ego.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
superheroes, yeah.
Absolutely. So I graduated into a recession, which was an interesting experience. We'd spent our whole time being told that we'd get a job anywhere because there's not enough engineers in the world. And I graduated in September 2008. So actually the reality was very different. A lot of graduate schemes and things had dried up. I ended up doing a technical sales job for a UK subsidiary of a Swiss company. And actually it was fantastic because all of a sudden they gave me a company car and a BlackBerry. You can tell it was of its age, and said, go sell stuff. And I hadn't got a clue what I was doing, but it was brilliant because it meant I could explore this kind of commercial side of the business, which actually, when I look back at my degree, I had hints of in there. The Institution of Mechanical Engineers mandate the programs across all UK universities for engineers, and there is a compulsory business and management element, but they're quite hidden and quite sporadic dependent on what university you study at. And actually, when I look back, they were the modules that I really liked, and I'd always do the assignments first for them, and I'd help everybody else out with their assignments. And I could never understand why the vast majority of engineering students didn't rush to do that piece of homework, but I did. And actually what I found was I really enjoyed kind of the management side and the business side and all those kind of grey areas of people and how they react. And that's not always going to be the same. So I ended up doing that. And then at the weekend, I was working for a race team as a data and control systems engineer, because actually outside of Formula One, most of motorsport is kind of made of freelancers. We call us weekend warriors. So I did that. And then after a few rotations of the earth, they invited me to join the team full time. They were expanding and taking on new cars, and they needed essentially a project manager that sat in the middle of all the different drivers, all the different freelance engineers, and kind of brought it all together. So that was the first time I was officially a project manager. But I think actually, again, when I look back, that's always been my natural tendency in life, is to be that person that joins all the dots and tries to solve problems before they happen. So yeah, I did that, and then I got the opportunity to move back down to Oxfordshire, which is kind of on and off being home after that. And I got a job to run a simulation company. So it had been founded by a private set of individuals, and they needed somebody to kind of come and run what I thought was going to be front of house, but actually ended up being all of house. I did that for 4 years, and then I started consulting and being self-employed after that, because I saw a lot of people needing kind of very proactive sort of support and guidance, particularly people from STEM backgrounds who that commercialization and management hadn't necessarily come that easily, or was something that they knew that they just didn't want to do. So actually, I think there's something very powerful about being an expert and being happy with that, particularly I think in my age group, and having come through quite an academic path, there can be this expectation that you can be a very, very good engineer, a very good scientist, and the next stage is naturally to be a manager. And actually, some of the best engineers I know, and the happiest engineers and the most productive engineers, are people that have stayed engineers despite everybody wanting them to become managers. And some of the best managers I know were not necessarily the most technically strongest people. I think there's something really, really interesting, and I think something that we should be taught at a younger age is actually there are many different paths for many different people, and actually knowing yourself and knowing your skill set is actually really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really interesting that you say that you noticed in yourself that you, although you have this very strong technical ability as well, what made you most happy to work on was really getting things done and joining the dots, as you said yourself. So that is a really strong insight to have at a younger age. And I think the other one is that the assumption that because somebody is a wonderful expert, he or she will automatically be a great manager or leader, that is of course something else that is not at all true, and that you have found out by your own experience. Some people take a lifetime to experience that, I think. And some HR departments could do with that sort of knowledge, I guess.
Yeah, I was so lucky. I have had so many people help me along the way who have kind of passed the ladder down to me and let me climb up it. And so it's one of the reasons I do a little bit of work with Oxford Brookes University, and it's something that I really enjoy, and I feel really lucky to have the opportunity to do, because so many people put their hand out, weren't scared or threatened by me, recognized that spark in me that I wanted to learn, and that there was something there, and they weren't threatened by me. They didn't see it was a problem that I was a girl. They absolutely wholeheartedly gave me their vote, and it's something that I am so grateful for, and it's something that I really actively try and do now, is to find those sparky kids that will work hard and are clearly passionate and proactive. And there is nothing I find nicer on a Friday afternoon than working with those kind of people.
Yeah, and to recognize the sparks, like somebody recognized the spark in you, right? Because it was not just your dad and obviously your parents who were very, supportive of your passion, or the passion actually that your father in a way passed on to you, but you also had a mentor, didn't you, when you were quite young, who believed in you and who helped you to climb that ladder. Can you say a little bit about
that? So shortly after discovering the lack of hand-eye coordination, I decided that I was going to write letters to anybody that I recognised off the TV, from Formula One or out of a racing magazine that was lying around the house. I'd write to them and ask them for their advice about how to have a career like they had. And I wrote to, various Formula One teams, and I have some really interesting responses in a drawer somewhere. Learning a bookkeeping and an additional language, because here I am, small girl in the early 90s. And there was one particular chap who had a column in a race car engineering magazine. I recognised his name, and off the letter went. And he spent the time and wrote me kind of this 4-page response. And it had reading lists and articles he'd photocopied, and when, learn to make a great cup of tea when you're 12, because by the time you're 14, you can go to a race circuit and help a team out. And as long as you can make a good cup of tea, they'll help you out. And
I wonder how many boys got that same advice, by the way. But hey,
I think it's something I do still pass on to people, because I get so many kind of graduate CVs and things in my time where it's very much about, I want a career in motorsport and that's what I want. And actually so much of joining a team is actually, we are a business. You have to bring something to the table. And I often say to people, you might not feel at 17 that you can bring anything to the table. But if you can say, I can sweep the floor and I can make a really cracking cup of tea, and I just want to learn from you, that actually means a lot to a lot of people. But this guy wrote me all those letters. He suggested university courses and books to read and everything. And I did that. And it meant a lot to me that somebody I didn't know and had no reason to look out for me had taken that time. And then shortly after I graduated, I was working in that first technical sales job. I was invited to go to the House of Lords for an industry award. And I was sat on the train. I was very nervous. I'd not been in the professional world very long. And I sat on the train with my little delegate list, and I looked down, and this guy that I wrote the letter to, he was going to be there. And I was really nervous, and I thought, actually, this is my chance. So I saw his name badge, and I just went straight up to him and said, hello, there's no way this isn't going to sound really weird, but I wrote you a letter when I was 9 years old, and I did all the things, and now I'm here. And he looked completely flummoxed for about 30 seconds, and then went, actually, I do remember that. Oh, cool, you're here. And actually, it was brilliant. Like, we've stayed in contact for sort of, the best part of 15 years now. I've given him references for jobs. He works for my old team. We go to an awards dinner every year. We email, we help each other out. And actually, he's coming to the end of his career now. And, he has been, so absolutely non-judgmental, no agenda, just, seeing that spark. And I think he's not the only person like that I've worked with. And then I am so grateful for people like those. And that's the sort of leader I want to be, because I have then come across people that don't have a generous leadership style. They are very unsure they're very threatened by those young sparky people, and they're quite protectionist, and actually because I was so spoiled, I think, in a way of coming across these people early on, it made me very aware when people weren't behaving like that towards me. And again, that kind of join the dots curious thing kicked in, and actually I realized that that's not the kind of people, and those people generally don't stay around for very long. They bounce around. And actually the people like the guy that I wrote the letter for, they're around for a very long time in an industry.
Yeah,
And
their hearts in it maybe as well. I like the term that you mentioned there. You say generous leadership. So if you had to recap for you what the parts are of generous leadership, other than of course what you just said, helping other people, what else would that look like?
I think some of it is parking your ego at the door when you need to. There are times when you maybe do need a little bit of ego. As I said earlier, racing drivers have quite a lot of ego. They have to be self-driven. It's competitive. It's hugely risky. And that does require a certain amount of complete faith in yourself and what you can do. And it's the same now in the world of startups. You have to have an unshakable belief in yourself, and in a negative connotation of that is ego. And actually, some of the best leaders I know have that deep inside, but that is not their overwhelming characteristic. They have flashes of that when they need it to push them through the hard times, but actually, particularly when they are working with teams, they are a servant leader. They are thinking about other people, and if you keep your people happy, you will get better results. And I think with motorsport in particular, because it is its very nature a competition, it is a race, there has been this kind of attitude of, people are fairly indispensable. There's always more people that are coming, and everybody does it because they love it. So you don't necessarily have to treat people brilliantly, because there's more fresh kids off the boat who'll come and help you, and you don't have to pay people very well. And we don't have time. We're all too busy, and we don't have time to nurture people and create these kind of diverse and inclusive environments. But I think that's really changing now, and you can start to see people making those investments in people, and without a doubt you can win races with that way, rather than with it being cold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And of course, having an ego and having that drive to win doesn't necessarily mean that you need to treat others in a way that will not make them want to come back to you.
No, absolutely. You do your best work when you are happy and rested and feeling creative, actually just driving in literal and kind of mental ways. You don't do that work. And that's something I probably learned as somebody running somebody else's business and running my own business is, you can work all hours of day and night in and out and think you're making progress, and you think you're being a good leader, and you think you're being a good manager. And actually the reality is you're not always that. If you come back, if you make a nice environment, if you can take time away, if you can do the other things that nurture your soul, you will do better work. And I think that's proven in not just my anecdotal experience, but in so much academic research.
It has. And unfortunately, despite all of that, despite the body of evidence that confirms exactly what you're saying, there are still managers and leaders and people who think that the only way to get things done is to be tough on whether it's deadlines or quality or not making mistakes or whatever. And that doesn't always help the environment in any way, the work environment, I mean. You have a strong interest also in diversity and inclusion, I know. And last time we chatted, you said something about the fact that it's not just when you're happy at work and you work with people who know that they're being valued, but also the great advantage of having different viewpoints in a team and having different opinions and even maybe different cultural backgrounds. Can you say a few more words about that?
Yeah, so it's something that I am so passionate about, and passion is an overused phrase often. But when I started in engineering and even, doing work experiences and things, I was so kind of convinced that the way to be successful was to behave like a 50-year-old white man, even though I was a 17-year-old girl. I didn't have that idea of what a successful kind of female could be. There were a few people I'd met on the way who were amazing drivers or managers or whatever, but they were so far in between that I couldn't be what I couldn't see. And I think that is so true. I've recently got into women's football, and I had this real epiphany last summer watching the Women's World Cup, because I am really into diversity and inclusion. I read all the books and I listen to the podcast. And actually, until I saw the England women's football team walk out onto the pitch, it genuinely hadn't occurred to me that I could play football. And I just thought, if I hadn't thought about that, then how many other women around the world and how many little girls have never thought, actually, I could be a footballer? And so now I think maybe I should have been a footballer in the past. But I think it's about having these kind of diverse leadership sets that we can look up to. And I think one of the hardest lessons I learned, and I definitely learned by doing it badly in my 20s, was, perpetuating this myth that I had to be harsh and shout and drink a lot in the bar and not care about politics or the planet or anybody else's feelings because I'm in motorsport and I'm going to win things. And actually, I'm not proud of that. I am now much more of an empathetic and servant leader because I'm now happy with who I am. And I think so much of that has been about acknowledging that diversity and inclusion aspect, is that actually I bring a different lived experience and I solve problems differently because my brain is wired up slightly differently. I see things differently because I have been treated differently to other people. And actually, I can see now you solve problems by having people that think in different ways. And you think in different ways for lots of different reasons, whether that is your gender or your lived experience or your academic path or your religion or your languages or something. There are loads and loads of different ways of thinking, and by far, and again, there is pools of academic research that support this. Diverse teams work better, they make more money, they innovate more frequently, and in my experience, they're just nicer environments to be in. If you are a curious problem solver and you're a bit of a creative person, which is what I am, and actually that is what most engineers are. They are not mathematicians or grease monkeys down a hole. Engineering is about problem solving. It is hugely creative, and actually creativity thrives in these kind of diverse and inclusive environments. And I think inclusion is the more important aspect of those two words that we use together a lot at the moment, is that I have been the token diversity hire without a doubt, but actually where I have stayed, it's because of the inclusion. It's because I'm not just ticking a box to say I'm there. It's because I feel valued when I am there. I overheard a conversation a while back that I wish I had intervened on. I heard somebody say, "Oh, so many fantastic, young graduate women engineers. They're so good at the interview and they've got these great academic records, and we hire them. And then after a while, they sit in the meetings and they don't really say anything. They just agree with what everybody else says." And I just had this overwhelming desire to unprofessionally shake the man and say, that's because of you. That's because they don't feel included. They don't feel like it's a safe, place to have an opinion or to disagree. And that actually so often doesn't come from them. That comes from you. And I think, again, we all have to take a pause. As leaders and managers, we need to take a pause and think about that every day to make sure that we are giving people those breathing spaces and those moments and those support.
And if I rephrase you correctly, that's not just a nice to have, it's an essential to have. So we have generosity, diversity, creativity, curiosity, all these great words. Ella, it has been a real inspiration to speak with you. I wish you all the very, very best in your career. And I think any company that can have you sorting through their stuff and being creative and diverse with them is a lucky company. Thank you so much. Be well.
Thank you.